Welcome to the Unapologetic with Janine McKinnon podcast, your go-to place for approachable conversations around sacred sexuality and conscious relationships. I'm your host, Janine McKinnon, certified trauma-informed sex, love, and relationship coach who's on a mission to support 1 million women and couples to experience deeper connection and more expansive pleasure inside and outside the bedroom. This is the space to go deep, to dive below surface level relationships and mess sex and explore the sacredness that sexuality and conscious relationships have to offer. Because deep connection, spiritual sexuality, full body orgasms, and transmuted sexual energy are available to everyone. And I'm here to serve the collective, to provide the knowledge, wisdom, and tools to access them. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful we're able to connect in this way, and I can't wait to dig into the contents of this episode with you. Without further ado, let's get into it. As Kehla and I are about to dive into a reading of my Venus sequence gene keys, we invite you to follow along if you are interested. So I just wanted to add a note. If you would like to do that, you will need your birth time, location, and date, and you can go ahead and visit genekeys.com to pull up your chart and then follow along with us as we move through this. So I'll leave the link for that in the description for you. Hello and welcome back to the Unapologetic with Janine McKinnon podcast. And this week we are here with a guest episode, and I'm really excited to explore the topic around human design and gene keys as it relates to our Venus sequence. And so how it can touch on our different traumas and triggers as it relates to our relationships, our different patterns that show up, and how we can take all of this information to really create and cultivate that unconditional love, that great conscious relationships that we're all about here. And I am joined with Kehla G, who is a bold 6'2" sacral generator, human design and gene keys business coach for entrepreneurs. Now, I'm not too sure about like that bold 6'2" part, so that's what you're here for, Kehla. Welcome. I'm so excited to learn about this with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me here. And I'm really grateful to be diving into the things I love the most, which are obviously human design and gene keys. And I do typically work with entrepreneurs and bring that into their business. But today we're going to be leveraging the Venus sequence in a more relationship conversation, which obviously ties into business too. But with the work that you do, I just feel like there's a really beautiful cross-sector integration that we can have. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. And I've dabbled into the world of human design a little bit, and my gateway was actually business. And for me, it brought a lot of relief and validation of like, oh, this is why these like typical things don't work for me. But I haven't heard conversations relating it to love and relationships. So I think that'll be really interesting to dive into. But before we do, I'm curious of how did you get into all of this? I know from checking out on Instagram and chatting a little bit, starting out as personal trainer, getting into mindset. So I would love if you could just share a bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I started my entrepreneurial journey about 8 years ago. Like you said, I was a personal trainer. I actually was a teacher before that. And I left that, got into personal training for 3 years. And then through that, I really started to dive into the art of coaching. And so obviously coaching was happening a lot in my sessions with my clients. And that's where I realized mindset was a huge thing that people needed to be successful. It didn't matter how great their plan was for losing weight. If they did not have a good mindset, it wasn't going to work. So then I started to lean into the online space, and I started a mindset coaching business back in 2019. And it was funny because my journey was initially in the online space, like I really struggled. So, we see a lot of people flashing numbers like 6 figures in 6 months and hitting all these crazy milestones, which is amazing, but that just wasn't my story. And so I started to really grapple with like, oh, I need more certifications, or, oh, I need more of this. And then eventually I started to realize, okay, you really need to get into business strategy. And luckily I had found human design and gene keys just before I really leaned into starting to incorporate more strategy. But I got really curious as to why, if, quote, all strategy works, why is it that some of it doesn't work for some people? Like there needs to be a reason. It can't just be, oh, you're not convicted. And so that's when I started to see the emphasis of human design and gene keys and how that really showcases why a strategy works in business or not. And so what I love about the gene keys, which we're going to be diving into today, is that it's a much more feminine approach. Like human design is tied into astrology. We have the chakra system. We have the I Ching system, which is also connected to the gene keys. But it's very much like, this is your type, this is your strategy, your authority, this is how you're designed to move, which is great. The gene keys, like you said earlier, they really paint the picture of your patterns and your triggers and your zones of genius. And so I love to bring this in from a feminine, contemplative perspective. So this is really the approach. Richard Rudd, the creator of the gene keys, the art of contemplation is how we infuse that wisdom into business. So today we're really going to be diving into the Venus sequence, which you said earlier is all about unconditional love and relationships. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or not, hearing this conversation, bringing up your gene keys, you're going to be able to really understand how you can leverage this and have like a really gentle and curious approach as to why and how these energies show up in your life.
So much great information there. Like, I was ready to ask, what's the difference between human design and gene keys? Because I've heard of gene keys, but didn't really know what that was. So I'm definitely gravitating towards the more feminine side of it and not as much of like the structure, here's this, here's that. But yeah, I'm getting more of that flow and kind of like the subconscious layers as it relates to the traumas and the triggers and different things like that. So this should be exciting. So I know you touched on a little bit right there in terms of the Venus sequence. Could you expand on it a bit more?
Yes, I will. So I'll share a bit more about what the gene keys are. Like I did a light contract with human design, but human design, like I said, there's astrology, there's the chakra system, there's the Kabbalah tree, and we have the I Ching system. So the I Ching system are like what we call are also the 64 hexagrams or the 64 gene keys. So when you're looking at your human design chart, and you know what, actually, I think this is a great time for me to screen share to just showcase everything that I'm verbally explaining. But when you look at your human design chart, so on the screen, we have Janine's gene keys and also her human design chart. You have the numbers that are inside of the centers on your human design chart are the I Ching system. And that with astrology, they get pulled into what we call the gene keys. So on this screen right now, we have a bunch of spheres or circles. We call them spheres. And there's like green spheres connecting to red ones and to blue. There's lots of numbers. There's lots of words. And it's very confusing and overwhelming, which is...
It looks super confusing. Whenever I see any of these charts pulled up, I'm like, what am I looking at?
Totally. But today, we're really just going to be focusing on the Venus sequence, which are the spheres that are colored in red. So the Venus sequence, so I'll kind of explain the breakdown of the gene keys. So each gene key is actually a representation of a planet, and the number inside is the gene key. So for example, in your purpose sphere, which is the start of the Venus sequence, we have gene key 35. Every gene key has 3 energetic expressions. We have the shadow, we have the gift, and we have the city. So every gene key has 3 expressions. The sphere itself has its own theme. And then we also have the line. So you see 35.4. So the line is also another layer of flavor. So it's crazy because it's just this tiny little thing on the screen, but it has so much depth when you start to look at, where does this show up in my life? And so the Venus sequence in particular is all about relationships. It's all about the energetic imprinting patterns that you've experienced throughout your entire life. And it shows you where you have healing and work to do and where common themes are going to show up so that you can take radical responsibility for yourself, which is so perfect because I know that this ties into the work that you do with your clients. So the Venus sequence is relationships. The activation sequence, which is the green, is all about your zones of genius and creating a core stability in your life. And I like to say in your business. Relationships is the Venus sequence with ideal clients, with your relationship to business. Obviously, today we're going to be talking more about your intimacy with yourself and others. And then we have the Pearl sequence, which is the blue. And that's all about your relationship to prosperity and how you're designed to be of service. So naturally, I dive into the Pearl sequence a lot with entrepreneurs because we have a business and we're here to be of service. So let me know if that brings a bit more clarity in terms of like what the gene keys are and the structure and the flow and how it connects. But I know that it can still be overwhelming when you look at everything on the screen, but we will get into it in bite-sized pizzas.
Yes, I feel like it brings a lot of clarity and it brings even more questions too. So, a couple things. What is, now I've lost the correct pronunciation, but you said it's based on like astrology, has the chakra system, and Jing Chi, or sorry, what
The
did
I Ching. So
I
I
Ching?
Ching, yes, comes from the Chinese divination text. So that is the 64 numbers. So there's numbers 1 to 64. Each of those are one of the gene keys, but they're also the hexagrams in that divination text from the Chinese culture. And so that with astrology creates these what we call the golden path. Like all three of the sequences are known as the golden path. So yours next to mine, next to your friends or your uncles, like they're all so different, but there's still going to be relatability because you may have some planets and spheres and gene keys that are the same, but it's also our lived experience that paints the story of what it is that we live. So that's what I love about the nuance of the gene keys.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of this like imprint or roadmap, but how it unwinds is how we live through our lived experience. And that's kind of how we apply this basic blueprint. Is
Yes,
that what this
totally.
is?
I think the way you said that was really great. It is our energetic imprinting because the planets and the astrology side of it is literally from the moment that we're born. Like it's that energetic astrological imprinting. So yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to see it. And the thing is too, it's so nuanced because the way you live through life and the relationships that you experience, you can go back and like, we'll talk about your purpose sphere in a minute, but like how you experience this today versus 2 weeks from now or 12 years ago is so different, even though that's the energetic imprinting that you had like the day that you were born. So that's why I love like the Gene Keys is not, oh, I'm going to buy the book, which is massive. It's so thick. The Gene Keys book is amazing, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to read the book once and know everything. It's literally a lifetime of experimenting, which is great.
Yeah, and all of the different interpretations. And as you said, interpreting it from this lived experience. And then again, a year, 2 years going through, you're going to look at it through that different lens. And what really resonated for me when it came to astrology and things like this, because I've always had that interest, but it was hard for me to explain. And what just kind of grounded me in that is thinking of, yes, of course, everything has energy. And so it makes sense that when we're born, the energy of the universe, of the planets and the stars, of course, that's going to have an impact on us the moment we come Earthside.
Totally. And you know what? I feel like women listening to your channel are going to resonate with this because it really fits with the work that you're doing. But if you really want like a scientific understanding as to how this energetically imprints on you, I want to invite you to go to YouTube and look up neutrinos. Like look up neutrinos because this is specifically the energy that comes from the planets and the stars and whatnot. And this is energy that will literally pass through everything, every moment, every time, every day, all day. And so, yes, the moment you're born and you come into this existence, neutrinos pass through you, and that is the energetic imprinting that you get. So it's not just, it's woo-woo, but it's not woo-woo. Like there is science behind this, so I just wanted to share that because you just said it without even realizing that neutrinos play a huge role in that energetic imprinting the moment you're born.
Okay, I will definitely look that up and make sure it's included in the show notes because I'm all about the woo. And woo also, it is science. It's like science is catching up to it. And it's really nice to have what I think of as kind of like the feminine and masculine understanding of this. Like the woo, the belief, yes, this resonates. I'm all about it. I feel like that's more the feminine. And then having the science that backs it up, it's like, okay, this is the logical masculine side for that approach. So my one other question that came up when you're explaining this chart in front of us is those 3 parts for each of the spheres, where it was the shadow, the gift, and then did you call it the city for the third one?
The city is like the highest expression. So on the screen share here, it just says here, the shadow is like your challenge. I also call this your point of resilience. Like when you're in the shadow of this gene key inside of the sphere, that really shows you how to look inward and look at like, okay, what is my experience? What am I making this mean? What can I take responsibility for? And the gift is known as your creativity, like your expression, like moving things forward, moving through it. And your city is like your essence, like the highest expression of what that gene key represents as a whole.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for the explanation on that. I was kind of feeling into that at city, but also the word, I'm like, let's just clarify to make sure.
Yes, yes. Okay, amazing. Do you want me to dive into your Venus sequence and we can see like how this shows up for you, like in your life and in your business?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, I'm so pumped. Okay, so first of all, I just love to say this to the audience. Like, I literally did not look at her gene keys until we got on the call, and I was like, hey, I need your birth information. Like, I don't know anything. I like know a bit about your work, literally don't know your gene key. So when it's like, oh my God, that resonates, this is not pre-planned. And I love saying that because it just shows the authenticity of how this can show up even when you're not aware of it, which is really great. So your purpose sphere. So when we finish the activation sequence, the way that it connects to the Venus sequence is like you have this stability in your body. And if you feel into relationships, when you feel safe with someone or you feel safe in your environment, you're more willing to open yourself up, right? You're more willing to be available for pleasure, for conversations, for navigating difficult situations. Like you start to open up, and that is really your essence. That is your being. So your purpose in the Venus sequence is like who you're being. So when we look at the 35, and it's funny because with the work that you do, the 35, the shadow was hunger, and then we had adventure and boundlessness. So I feel like the kind of women that are going to come into your world are women who have this hunger and desire of like, yeah, like there's more for me. Like I'm so hungry. Like this isn't how I want my relationships to be. This isn't how I want to be connected to myself. Like it's just this insatiable energy. So when we look at adventure, it's this lens of getting curious of, well, how is it that you want this to look and feel like for you? Relationship to yourself and others, like what does that look like? And the city of boundlessness is realizing that in really in any moment, in any relationship, and how we see ourselves when we look in the mirror, how we talk to ourselves is boundless. Like we really can do, be, and have what it is that we desire. So the 35th gene key in your purpose is like the purpose of your work and like who you're being and how you show up for yourself and in relationships. So the fourth line of breath is supporting yourself and others with finding a rhythm, having that expansion and that contraction through the work of the 35th gene key of like navigating the contraction and expansion of hunger, adventure, and boundlessness, and helping yourself and others find that flow that works for them. So I'm curious how that resonates with you so far.
Absolutely. And I love how you related it with my work. Because that is something I think about quite often with that hunger. There's two camps of like, I know there's more out there. Like, yes, I'm satisfied. Sex and intimacy is fun, but I know there's more. How do I access that? I have the hunger for it. And then there's the other camp where it's facing a lot more of those challenges, the lost libido, the co-parenting roommate phase. And so having that hunger to change things, it's time to make that change. And so finding the different ways to have that apply to each unique individual, because we are so different. And so that's incorporating things like love languages, erotic blueprints, breaks and accelerators, is all of like finding that adventure in that different way that it's going to work for each person. And then for me, when you said boundlessness, I'm like sacred sexuality. Like we have masturbation and have very goal-orientated orgasm type sex, slow pleasure. And then sacred sexuality is like that boundlessness where you can reach the divine through your pleasure. So yes, very resonant.
Oh my God. The way we're going to go through this right now, so good. I'm pumped for this. So between each of the spheres, you'll see there's what we call pathways. So we have, in the Venus sequence, there's Dharma, Karma, Intelligence, Love, and Realization. So the pathways are in between the spheres in the golden path to show the transition between the energy and to show that nothing is locked in. There's a flow and a transition between the experience of hunger into, for example, you have the 36th in your attraction sphere. The shadow is turbulence, right? So 36, I resonate with this gene key a lot because it is one of my main gene keys in my chart. And so that turbulence, humanity, and compassion, it speaks volumes for me, and I can't wait to hear your experience of it. So the attraction sphere represents the kind of relationships that you attract into your life. And in the gene keys, they talk about it is the sexual wounding that you have to work through. So your dharma is like your truth. So you go from like, this is my purpose, this is my work, this is what I'm doing, this is my truth. These are the kinds of relationships that I attract into my life, because the pathway of karma then is like, here's what you're alchemizing to learn and receive the gifts from those relationships. So the kinds of relationships, or even I also say as an entrepreneur, the kinds of relationships that you have with your business, or even with the kinds of clients that you work with, you may notice the 36 gene key energy. So the shadow is like, let's say women are coming to you and they're in that turbulent state emotionally as well, because the 36 also connects with the emotional solar plexus in human design. And it's like this emotional turbulence, like, why am I feeling this way? Like, I can't express myself. I'm disconnected from myself. That gift of humanity is realizing the totality of your experience. Like, yes, you're going to have good days, bad days. Like, yes, you're going to have good weeks, days, months, years of sex and not, and years and months and days where you are connected to yourself and you're not. How are you going to have compassion for yourself through that experience? So the one line with the shadow side of sterility versus fertility, the one line, so there's 6 lines, different expressions for each sphere, but they still represent similar flavors. The one line is always the foundation. So when people come to you, it's like you're there to support them with the fertility of, it could literally be their fertility if they're looking to, to get pregnant, but it could also be like the conception of completely shifting your sex life and your relationship to pleasure. So it's either this is where we're going, but the shadow side, if they're in turbulence and they're sterile AF, it's like, yeah, there's nothing going on. Got some fucking cobwebs in the dungeon. Like, that's the vibe, right? So that's what the attraction sphere is in a nutshell. And that's how I would intuitively interpret it for you based on your business and how you support, the women that you work with.
Okay, so the attraction is really all about those relationships. And it's interesting with fertility, like the bee is my symbol and is incorporated into my logo. And that's a symbol for fertility and community and abundance. So it's really interesting to see that parallel there. And then in thinking of like my relationships throughout my life and how this has shown up, in terms of turbulence, like I feel like there was so much turbulence growing up with like familial and then as well as different boyfriends and things like that. It was very turbulent, but I always knew, again, kind of touching on that hunger, that I wanted more and I wouldn't get that more with this turbulent relationship. And I left people that I was in love with just because I knew that the life with them wouldn't lead to the life I wanted. So it's interesting just seeing that parallel there. And what comes to mind with the humanity and also going back to that other first sphere we started on with purpose, with the rhythm. Like I feel like I'm very cyclical and all about the natures, and I've really been leaning into feminine cycles and seasonal cycles and moon cycles and really applying that to my life. And that's how I found a lot of flow and a lot of compassion for those more shadowy times, those darker, more reflective inward times.
Yes. Oh my gosh. See, this is great. I love that I'm sharing this with you, and I'm sharing intuitively based on the very minimal information I know about yourself and your business, but it's like you're able to see how this shows up for you. And that's the point of the gene keys. Like there's so much fluidity here. And I could sit here with somebody could have the exact same birthday, born in Vancouver, same time, the whole thing. They could have the same gene keys, but their lived experience is going to show up differently. But then again, you can see, because you're a woman who's self-aware and you do this deep work, you can see these patterns showing up, right? So as we continue to go through the gene keys, what you'll notice is, let's say afterwards, if you realize, oh, I'm feeling really like limited, or I'm feeling a lot of hunger here, or there's so much turbulence, the point is you can come back to your gene keys and be like, oh my gosh, this turbulence is showing up in my relationships. Like, where where am I lacking humanity? Like, where can I bring this in and start to access, like, moving through that energy? So this is why I'm obsessed with the gene keys. They're so feminine and they're so nuanced, but it just keeps the movement going when it comes to our energy.
And what you said there is like exactly my approach with turbulence. Like, I'm all about the shadow work. Some people are like, I want to avoid going there. And I'm like, bring it on, baby. Like, this is a shit time. Okay, let's move through. Let's feel this. Let's go through. Bring humanity, compassion, acceptance into it. And that's where the transformation comes. And this just comes to mind, so I'll share it. It's like in this past year, the low point in our relationship with just this like deep honesty and bringing up a bunch of shit from our past that came up is like my favorite point in our relationship, because how we were able to move through that together was how we were able to support each other. And like for me, it really brought me to a point of like, oh, I don't really see how we're becoming together. I really see the man in front of me right now and how he's willing to support me through this turbulence. And so, yeah, the turbulence can actually be my favorite because of what we get out the other side.
Yes. Oh, it's so funny. I relate to that too. Like I've really seen turbulence play out in my relationships as well with my fiance, but also my experience in business has been so turbulent. And so the way that you just said, I see the man in front of me, like that is pure humanity, like, and compassion, like right there. You can just see this is how the gene keys show up in your life. Like, it's crazy when you can have a conversation about anything and you could bring up the gene keys, and it's just such a curious thing to see them come to life and be alive through illumination, right? So yeah, I love that. Okay, ready for me to keep going?
Yes.
Okay, so like I said, you're here to alchemize the experience of turbulence in relationships, and that becomes your karma, right? The karma of like your gifts of what you're here to give and receive through your lived experience in relationships. So now it's interesting because we're going back in time in terms of the astrological placement. So the IQ is your intelligent quotient. This is the energetic imprinting that you've received between the ages of 14 to 21. Your EQ is your emotional quotient, and this is the energetic imprinting that you've received between the ages of 7 to like 15. And then the SQ, your spiritual quotient, is where you've received your energetic imprinting and like your lived experiences between the ages of 0 to 7. So there's like 3 intense phases where whenever I contemplate these gene keys, I always look back like what themes was I going through during that time of my life where this is showing up now in my adulthood. And then the last sphere, it says vocation here, and that's the start of the pearl sequence. But if I were to separate the entire chart, it would actually say your core wound. So your core wound is like the energetic imprinting and deepest wounding that you receive while in the womb of your mother. So we'll like go back in time, but I just wanted to share. Now we're getting into like these phases within the Venus sequence. Okay. So your IQ, ages 14 to 21, the 60th gene key. So we have the shadow of limitation, realism, and justice. And your IQ is like your mental capacity and or barriers that you have, like how you mentally process things. And so the goal with the IQ and the EQ being connected by the pathway of intelligence is that when you can mentally break down in a very intentional, loving way, like your mental blocks, is when you open up and connect to yourself and others emotionally. Right? So if you notice, typically what happens, let's say, you're coaching around, supporting women in relationships or with themselves, it's always going, like, notice, it's always going to be this mental realization. And then it's like they pour into their body and they connect with their heart every time. So when we look at this theme of mentally, you may notice between the ages of 14 to 21, like really look at like, where did I experience limitation? Like, where did I feel limited and where did I need to pull back and have a realistic perspective in terms of like what was right for me? So here's the funny thing. This is like a very intuitive thing coming up for me right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was an experience where maybe you naturally felt more connected to your spirituality or in relationships, and it was like you're more self-expressed, and it's like people are imposing these limitations like, oh, you shouldn't think like that, you shouldn't be like that, but then you realize like, this is my truth. And it's like the city of justice is like you now coming forth obviously into your 30s and you're like, this is the work that I do with women. Like, I'm unapologetic about it. And so the fourth line of the influential mind is that your gift is like having this influence on yourself and others and being able to help them see things differently, see their limitations and help them break through that and have a realistic perspective on like how things can change and how things can be different. So I'm curious how that resonates with you.
Yeah, what comes to mind, like 14 to 21 was probably amongst my most turbulent time personally. I moved out on my own at 16, dropped out, moved in with boyfriends, and I'd say throughout 14 to 21, even going into 25, like I was promiscuous, party girl, and like I did feel like I owned that. Like I was comfortable and okay with it. That said, now where I'm at, looking back, I was always seeking validation in all of the wrong places. And it was coming from like being seen and cared for, even though that wasn't actually what it is. So I've like had that growth of how I look at it now. But at the time, like I felt good about it and did have those limitations with like slut shaming and different friends and things like that, creating lies and rumors about me.
Yeah, so that's the limitation. And like you having justice of just being unapologetically yourself. Like that's really what I'm hearing. And like that's so beautiful. So notice that mental breakthrough allows you to, that pathway of intelligence takes you to, so ages like 7 to 15, the gene key 61. So we have the shadow of psychosis, inspiration, and sanctity. So the way that you just shared about, even though this was like before teenage times, the way you just shared about, I feel like that promiscuous ways and the seeking validation is kind of this form of psychosis, because it's the psychosis. What that means is just, it's like the inability to conceptualize, like things being confusing, things being torn apart, things being misunderstood. And so what's the gift of inspiration is really looking at, instead of trying to figure it out, it's more like taking a step back and thinking, what can I be inspired by in this experience? Like there's everything in front of me. It can be overwhelming, but it can be inspiring. And sanctity is like the wholeness. So it's like, okay, there's a lot happening here. Like this may seem fucked up or like not the right thing, but how can I step back and be inspired by this, create something from it, and realize the wholeness in it in the way that it is? And so the fourth line of kindness and meanness, especially, that prepubescent stage, is really looking at being kind with yourself, being kind with others. And this might be a time where you experience like you either mean to yourself or others were mean to you. And there was just a lot of this confusion with the psychosis. But then obviously I feel like now that we're adults looking back, it'd be easier to see the inspiration from that, because of like, wow, that made me who I am today. And that's how I make a difference for other women that I work with.
Interesting, because my parents got divorced at 7. And so like the 7 to 15, like that's leading up to me being out on my own. And I just think of how it was like a lot of daddy issues and family issues and me feeling like I wasn't understood at all, didn't fit in, hopped around from different friend groups. And with that feeling of lack of understanding, just ended up leaving and going on my own. And thinking of like even more later in adulthood with like the psychosis and inspiration and sanctity, thinking of like a low point in our marriage after having 2 kids a year and a half apart and feeling really resentful and just like caught up in all of these different things. And one of the key things that pulled me out of that is like focusing on gratitude and inspiration, and like having gratitude for the small things he did do. Like I may have felt really resentful being stuck at home with the kids all day while he went off to work at that stage in our life, and then being like, no, he's going to work for us. He's going out and chopping wood for our wood stove when it's cold, and he doesn't want to do that, but he's doing that for us. And so having appreciation for that is kind of part of the turning point for us in our relationship.
I love that. It's so crazy how you see the patterns, like they spiral throughout our entire life. Like even though this is the 3 intense phases in the Venus sequence, and we see where this shows up for us at that time, we can also see how it's impacting us now, and how we choose to be different, or do we choose to embrace the aspects that we really loved about that time or who we were as that person. So yeah, I really love that. So moving into, we're going to keep going back in time here. So the pathway of love, and going into the spiritual quotient. So the spiritual quotient is what it is. Like, it's the spiritual experience that you have with yourself and others. And you can see that. So it's right in the middle of the pathway of breakthrough in the activation sequence. And this spiritual quotient is like the breakthrough that you have in terms of connecting with your deepest wounding, but then realizing that this is your biggest gift. So you have the mental breakthrough in the IQ, you have the emotional breakthrough here, and this is like the spiritual breakthrough. So here's what's interesting, and I love that you have duplicates of your gene keys so that you can compare and contrast. Like, a gene key in a different sphere with a different line can be so different, but still have same flavors. So again, we have the 60th, which is similar to your IQ. So it's like, spiritually, if you look at the relationship that you've had with yourself, with others, with source, with God, with whatever it is that you call existence, noticing how the breakthroughs really came from the limitations that you have, and being able to reconnect with that truth for yourself, having that realistic perspective of, this is what's true for me. Like, this is how I am spiritually expressed in my work and my relationships, as a mother, as a guide, as a mentor, as a coach, and having that justice of realizing that you can overcome that. Like, that is the breakthrough. So the 2 line of freedom is ultimately being fully self-expressed. And another way that you can read the gene keys is, the purpose connects really well with the attraction, which connects to the SQ. So if you look at these themes, we go from like adventure, humanity, to realism, and it's this ascension towards your relationship to spirituality and how that impacts your relationships with others. So I feel like that was a very high level example, but I'm curious, like, what was evoked in you based on what I shared with the 60th gene key being in the SQ compared to the IQ.
Yeah, what comes to mind is, well, 0 to 7. I don't remember that time at all. And like, now, as almost 35-year looking back, that's not so weird. But I remember being 10, 12 and not remembering anything before the age of 7. And again, that's when my parents were divorced. Pretty sure there was some different trauma going on, and that's why I don't remember. And at the same time, I know that there was no spirituality, no religion whatsoever in my household. That's kind of how my mom was raised, and my dad was raised Jehovah's Witness, and they didn't want to bring that in the home. So there's no connection with source or God or spirit or anything at all. And so I feel like that has been my limitation, and it's only really the last 3 years that I've become a more spiritual person. I had that upbringing of like Jehovah's Witness and like looking at how that's affected my family in different ways, but that was the only kind of spiritual thing that I was able to glean on. And so it was actually through my work with sacred sexuality that I have opened up into different energies and spirits and guides. And my intention for this year is to actually build my relationship with my spirituality. And I came up in conversation just yesterday or the day before, actually another podcast conversation. And I hit a point, I'm like, how do you pray? Like, I've never seen anyone actually pray outside of movies and TV, but like, I'm curious, like, how does that work? How do you have a relationship with source or whatever it is for you? And so that's something that I'm really going through right now, and sharing that with my husband too, because he had his own upbringing that had religious influence, but because of certain situations that happened, he had a very negative outlook, understandably, on religion. And so that stayed up until more recently, where because of me and what I'm going through, we're having more of these conversations, and it's starting to shift his perspective as well. And we're starting to have more of these conversations with my kids.
That's awesome. I really love that. And I can hear the freedom in you sharing that too, like freedom for yourself, freedom for your husband, freedom for your kids, where typically people who have had an unfortunate experience with flavors of religion and spirituality, they felt boxed in. That's usually the number one thing. It's like you had to be a certain way, act a certain way, and there was a lack of freedom in that. So I love that this is coming up for you. And I just feel intuitively to tell you, like, I think you should contemplate the 60th gene key more, like even after a conversation, because there's so much wisdom there. And I think it might even inspire you in different ways on how you can bring that conversation back to your family, which is really beautiful.
Okay, we'll look that up, especially because it showed up in multiple times now. And another thing that comes to mind on this same thing is that I feel like I always had this pull to more of the spiritual, energetic, kind of witchy side of things. And because of different things I heard adults in my sphere talk about those things, I always kept it inside. Oh, I won't be accepted if I share this. And that's something that also showed up in my marriage. I remember years ago, we walked past the psychic booth and my husband just made a comment about it, like how that's all so silly. And so again, I like kept inside, okay, don't share this parts of me with him. And then it was through creating that safety within myself that I slowly started sharing more and more of these things. And it was like a year later from that instance of walking past that booth, he was at a witchy shop, like buying me crystals and tarot cards and things like that as gifts.
I love
so it's
that.
just interesting seeing that journey.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Okay, we have one sphere left, which is so exciting. So from this spiritual breakthrough and acceptance and radical self-love, like just deeply loving yourself, trusting yourself, like the heart of your essence, we move into the pathway of realization, and this is the breakthrough realization of your core wound. So you have 43.4 here, and we have the shadow of deafness, insight, and epiphany. So what I love about this, and this is where, we start to move into the pearl sequence a bit, but your core wound is your greatest talent and gift that you're here to share with the world. So when we look at the shadow of deafness, it's really interesting because even just through the themes that you've shared in terms of your life and your relationship with yourself and sexuality and sacred sexuality and your upbringing, deafness is like the inability to hear or connect with oneself or others. And so that insight for me is being curious. It's like when somebody's talking and they're like, yeah, I hear you. And it's like, okay, but are you listening? Like there's a difference between hearing and listening. And so that insight is the flip of curiosity, because let's say when we lead to the city of epiphany, this really ties into a realization, like something you've never heard before, or maybe it's something that you've never listened to before. Somebody said something to you, or even you listen to yourself in a way that you've never listened to before. And it's that connection is what creates the epiphany. And that's what creates the conversation of, for example, the women that you work with, shifting their relationship to their sexuality, to pleasure, to masturbation, to whatever kind of relationships they're interested in having. So that is like your core essence, your core wound. And so that deafness might also play into, because I said this is like the imprinting that you receive while in the womb of your mother. You may have noticed themes throughout your life where you feel like you weren't being heard. Whereas I feel like you shared that. Parents divorcing, the way that you moved into, being promiscuous, the way that you navigated moving out. Like there's so much energy around being misunderstood and not being heard. But if you actually realize, like, I can hear this with the way that you're sharing, you've had this far-sighted view on your life and the work that you do, that's given you the insight and the epiphany of like, this is how I meant to support myself and women. Like I've gone through all of this specifically because of X, Y, and Z, even if I feel like my parents or my friend or whoever growing up didn't validate me, and there's that feeling of deafness there because you feel like you weren't heard. So that's like a really deep pillar in terms of the work that you do with clients and how you're of service to them, but also the deep work that you do or have done or are doing continually with yourself in terms of hearing yourself with real intention.
Yeah, resonates so much in thinking about my upbringing and like being more of the promiscuous party girl. Like all of that was completely disassociating and disconnecting myself from myself with alcohol and drugs and avoidance and all of those different things. And it was through my shift into this world of sacred sexuality that I actually connected with my body for the first time ever, really. And now, like, it's been such a gift to be so connected with my body and notice all of these different messages she's telling me and the intuitive nudges. And again, that was through sacred sexuality. And so that's what I help other people with. It's through this work. You have this ripple effect that impacts so much of your life. Because if you're disassociating from your body when you're in your relationships or those more intimate experiences, like, you're not having a thriving, passionate marriage and sex life if you can't even feel the sensations in your body. And this is actually a conversation I feel like I've been having over and over lately. And I have a journey at the end of the month all about feeling the dark shadows, going through shame and guilt and anger and sadness and finding safety within that to come out the other side. And it's also funny you mentioned the not heard, because that is my pet peeve. Like, talk about relational patterns. That is like my pet peeve, and it's something I see in myself, how it is a trigger point for me. And if I feel like I'm not heard, I'm like, oh, you don't remember me telling you. Da, 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 da. When really it's totally understandable. Or maybe he does remember. I don't remember every single thing. And when someone starts talking, it's like, oh yeah, I know that. But it's a pattern that keeps popping up from like me feeling like I'm not heard.
I love that you have the awareness. And that's the thing. I love bringing up the gene keys with people who are already doing deep self-awareness work, where I can share this and you're like, yeah, I resonate. I connect to X, Y, and Z, because it just makes it easier to dive further into the gene keys and really see like, okay, these are showing me my lessons in life. These are showing me my triggers, my patterns, and it all comes back to taking radical responsibility for our experience and deciding whether or not that's going to dictate how we live our life and how we guide others and how we work with others and support them. So yeah, I loved how, again, audience, Janine and I don't know each other, like straight up. And so for me to, first of all, to go into your gene keys and for you to share so vulnerably just made this conversation so much richer. But obviously your audience knows you, right? But it's also just, again, coming back to that humanity piece, the gene keys are such a gift. Like, they are so fun to contemplate. Sometimes they are so fucking annoying because you're like, oh my God, this shadow just won't go away. It's like a lost puppy trying to piss on my leg. Like, stop, you know? And so you kind of have to lean into that and be like, okay, puppy, like, what do you need? You know what I mean? And give it the attention. And so that's why I shared earlier, like, the art of contemplation. If you're like, what are the gene keys? Like, notice the conversation today. Notice how I said, okay, this is a shadow gift in city. This is how you can experience this in your life. It's about being curious. It's about being patient about the patterns that are happening. And it's like having that inquiry and that curiosity is like what makes a difference. But if you're there and you feel like you're trying to understand your gene keys and you're feeling resistance, I want to invite you to just literally back off and be curious rather than trying to find the answers, because it's really funny. The gene keys, if you try to figure it out, it's like they freeze and they don't make sense. But you need to dance with it, which is why I said earlier, like, they're more feminine, they're more fun, and they're more flowy, which is really great.
Yes, and that is exactly the same on the flip side when it comes to pleasure. And see people wanting to experience more pleasure as soon as they're like, oh, I'm almost there. No, not quite getting there. And starts to like try and force it and think their way through it. And it's like, no, that is pulling you out of it. You need to just come with play and curiosity and exploration and be in your body and just feel and experience what comes up, not trying to get there, trying to figure it out.
Yes, so good. Oh, I love that I was able to talk about the gene keys and it like related so deeply with your work. I knew that it was going to be a great conversation, but it was so fun.
Yeah, it was. And I feel like these go so well hand in hand, like with the gene keys. It's like exploring again, bringing that curiosity and, oh, here's this different shadow that just keeps fucking popping up. Okay, so now let's do some work. I understand what's going on. I have that awareness piece. Now, okay, let's move into the other side. And I'm reminded of when you were touching about like the IQ and the EQ and the SQ. Like for me, I find so many women get so caught up in their head and wanting to control things, and you can't control feeling your emotions. And so it's really creating that sense of safety from within to be in your body, to feel the things. And then you begin to connect with your energy body, connect with more of the spiritual side of these things as well as you go through your own process.
Yes. So beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This was so much fun. I know you have a Venus sequence challenge coming up where people can kind of try this on for themselves. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I have in the show notes, we'll have the link. It's a 7-day Venus sequence challenge. It's an email series. It is targeted towards entrepreneurs. But even you heard today's conversation, like I bring up business, but then I talk about literally the Venus sequence. You can sign up for this. It's 7 emails that go to your inbox, and it will guide you on how to contemplate your gene keys, like your Venus sequence. So that'll be in the show notes for you to try on. If you were like, oh my God, I really loved this conversation, I want to learn more. That's my free gift to everyone, which I think will be really fun.
Thank you. Well, I'll definitely sign up for that too. And I'd love if you could just share a bit more about that contemplation side and what that looks like.
Yeah. So contemplation is the space between meditation and concentration. So that's why when it comes to the gene keys, if you're hardcore focused trying to figure it out, it's too much. You want to come back and be curious and meditative. Like notice how when you meditate, or literally, I'm sure there's so many somatic practices I'm sure you do with your clients where you have to slow down and take the foot off the gas and be present, connect with your breathing. So that is how you want to approach the gene keys. I think whenever you take time to read about them, or if you listen to audios about them, go for a walk, be watering your plants, like be doing something that is meditative, because it's not like hardcore factual information that's going to stick to your brain. It's going to be malleable depending on the day and how you relate to that specific gene key or how that theme shows up for you. So that's my invitation for everyone. Like when you sign up for the Venus Sequence Challenge, or if you decide to move forward and continue to dive more into the gene keys, that's something that's really important, is that art of contemplation and the juicy slow burn. Like the gene keys are a slow burn. That's how I explain them to people.
I love how you explain that, because I'll say quite often, like your wisdom, your inner power comes to you through slowness and stillness and quietness. You need to give yourself the space just to feel and to have the downloads come in. You can't just go through, do one thing after the other. Like you're just having your stress cycle activated when you're just so go, 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 and you're not giving space to open yourself up, to have that curiosity and play. And again, those different downloads come in. So we need that space. And that, I think, in terms of spirituality, so many people are like soaking in all the podcast episodes, all the books, and like taking in all the information. But it's like, yes, that's great. It's great to have that information, that awareness, and we need the time to integrate so we can actually apply it to our life and begin to see those changes. That's where I see a lot of different people getting stuck, is yes, they can have this awareness, but it's not having that space for integration and then implementation. So it's really great that you're bringing that into this challenge, of this is where you can actually have that space to integrate and contemplate.
Yes, totally. And I think that even when you contemplate the gene keys, like let's say if I asked you, like, how does turbulence show up for you in your body? How does humanity show up for you in your body? How does compassion show up for you in your body? Because one of the things I didn't get into today is, yes, there's the 64 gene keys, but there's also the 64 chromosomes, and it's like related to your DNA. Like it actually is very connected to your DNA on like a scientific level. And so this isn't like astrology, I Ching thing outside of me. It really does live like in the body. Like there's a lot of depth and wisdom for you to dive into.
Well, that makes sense with the name Gene Keys, that there is the genetic side for it too, which I never thought about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, before we fully close off, you touched on so many great nuggets throughout and right here as well, but I always like to ask our guests if you have any last words of wisdom or advice for people that are interested in perhaps just getting started with human design and gene keys, or perhaps looking at how they can apply this information to their relationships or even business. What messages do you have for them?
Yeah, I think realizing that again, it's a slow burn. There's no, you could fly through the 7-day challenge, jump onto the next ones that I have, but really until you stop and ask yourself those introspective questions and really look at, how is this showing up in my relationships? How is this showing up as a mental block for me? How is this showing up emotionally for me? Like, what are these patterns? Like, again, it's always coming back to that curiosity, and you can never rush curiosity. And so I think that I just want to invite people to consider that. And you can go to geneticmatrix.com to get your chart, or you can go to genekeys.com. We can put those links in the show notes. But great. those links are going to help you. And I think even the Gene Keys website, there's a lot of free resources there. And if you are somebody who's an entrepreneur, my podcast channel, Living in Fierce Alignment, I have like over 440 episodes. I talk so much, about human design, gene keys, and business. So that will be in the show notes as well. But yeah, there's just a lot of resources. So just walk into the water slowly and have fun with it, because there's no rush, really.
I love that, because there is so much information out there. So just take your time and follow curiosity and see where it leads you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, for doing that reading with me. That was a lot of fun. And thank you to listeners that have followed along. We'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. So thanks. Until next time.
Thank you, Janine. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us inside the Unapologetic with Janine McKinnon podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you feel called, I would so appreciate it if you left us a review to help us reach more women and couples so they can experience deeper connection and more expansive pleasure inside and outside the bedroom too. Until next time, embrace your desire and experience your magic.